Now, let's go back again to Romans chapter 1, verse 18. It says, "The wrath of God is revealed from heaven." What that means is, in Paul's writings, the wrath of God doesn't mean that God is just some kind of emotions out of control and just an emotional basket case like we imagine human anger. It means that God, as a just judge, has already made plain, it's already revealed that there is a penalty, that there is a punishment for sin. Now, Paul wants people to know that. Why does Paul begin to tell this? Here's why he begins to tell this. Because there were people in Paul's day, just like there are people today, who would say, "Oh, well, that Jesus, that's good enough for you, but I don't need that. I'm not interested." And especially Paul's own friends who were Jews, they might say, "Well, we've got the Old Testament law. What do we need Jesus for? I'm not so bad. I'm not as bad as that person over there." That's kind of how people humanly think. And I've talked to people like that who think, "Oh, this salvation," here's what they say, "it's just a crutch for weak people." But see, Paul here says, so I want you to know that the just punishment against sin is revealed from heaven. What he's starting to do now is to convince his hearers. He wants to persuade his hearers that everybody with no exceptions, everybody stands in need of this righteousness that comes through faith in Christ. Everybody needs it. Nobody is good enough to not need it. So first of all, in chapter 1, he begins to say God's just punishment against sin is well known, or it's revealed. And if it's not, he's going to make it plain to you. And he has two categories of people he wants to talk about. First of all, just general garden variety ordinary people, just humanity in general, specifically Gentiles, specifically people who are not part of the Old Covenant people of God. That's who he addresses first of all. I think what he might have in mind, Paul was an educated man. He knew about the Greek philosophers, Socrates and Aristotle and Plato, and sometimes people hold them up for, and they have some very thoughtful writings. Socrates seemed like a very good man. But if you read here, you might see a veiled reference to these Greek philosophers. And he's trying to say that even these intellectuals, even these smart people in the world, they need a righteousness from God. Everybody needs what Jesus is offering here. So let's just read with that in mind. Verse 18, "For the wrath of God, or God's just punishment for sin, is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness." Literally, that could be translated, who suppress the truth by their unrighteousness. Verse 19, "Because that which may be known of God is manifest to them, for God hath showed it to them. For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead." Godhead means the attributes of God. "So that they are without excuse." Now, what is Paul saying in these verses? He's saying that everybody knows that there is a God, and everybody knows that there is a all-powerful and a righteous and a just God. And the way they know it is they can look around at creation. And nobody's got any excuse. Because when you look around at creation, Paul says, it tells you, if you see creation, that tells you there must be a creator. Now, some people, did you notice he says they hold the truth in unrighteousness? Literally, it means they suppress the truth by unrighteousness. Paul says that everybody knows that by seeing the creation. In our day especially, people try to suppress that truth. And all kinds of intellectual ideas about how there was a big bang and everything just came into existence in some kind of magical way. Listen, to me, it takes more imagination to believe that. It takes more faith to believe that than just to believe the Bible. They'll mock the idea of a creator. But listen, if you ask me to imagine some chemicals accidentally mixing together and then life coming into existence, that is more fantastic to me than thinking a creator made it. Paul says when you see the creation, you look around and see this world and you think, this could not have come here by accident. This didn't just pop into existence by some chemicals falling on the floor and mixing together. I've spilled some chemicals together and never created life, And what you might ask yourself is, why isn't it going on, why don't you ever see this anywhere else? Well, it's because a creator has done it. And Paul says, nobody's got an excuse because everybody can look around and see what's physically real. And that tells you, the things that are physically seen tell you that somebody put them there. Somebody made them. Somebody made this world. I've read about the earth, for instance. One man I was reading, he's not necessarily a Christian, but he's saying the earth is the right distance from the sun. If it were any further, life couldn't exist. If it were any closer, life couldn't exist. It's at the perfect distance away from the sun so that life can exist. And not only that, but the way the earth works, the person I was reading from was a geologist. He says the earth is constantly in a state of recycling itself. On one side of the earth, it's called an induction zone in the middle of the ocean. And the earth is drawing in these big crevices, drawing the material down into itself. And on the other end, over in Indonesia, all these volcanoes are popping up. And it's constantly, over the period of thousands of years, recycling itself. It's like this gigantic factory or machine that is constantly keeping itself in balance. How could that have happened just by some kind of accident? It tells you that some kind of, well, not some kind, it's God, some creative force, and it's God who did it, who created this place to support us, for us to live here. And Paul says that the things that are seen tell you and speak of the invisible God. So he says, because of that, nobody has an excuse. Verse 21, because that when they knew God, they glorified Him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Boy, isn't that the truth? That's just what I was talking about. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. And they changed the glory of uncorruptible God into an image like unto corruptible man, and birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Paul's talking about how mankind, especially in ancient times, has a propensity for creating gods that resemble what he says here, corruptible man, four-footed beasts, creeping things. Like I told you, my friend Kingston, who's from India, he's talked to me before about all the different gods they have and all the different statues and different things they make and that they worship, but they've made them with their own hands. And these gods can't really do anything for them. They can't speak, they can't move. In fact, like I referred to you just a moment ago, when time of trouble comes, they have to pick their God up and carry him to safety. Whereas Kingston says, with our God, when there's times of trouble, our God picks us up and holds us, keeps us safe. Anyway, reading. Let's see, verse 24. Wherefore God gave them up to uncleanness through the lusts of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. For this cause God gave them up to vile affections. Even the women did change the natural use into that which was against nature. And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another. Men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves the recompense of the error that was meet, or appropriate. Verse 28. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things that are not convenient. Now, something that's interesting in this verse that's not apparent in the English language. And by the way, I'm not a Greek scholar. I don't read the Greek language. Anton back here is studying Greek, so he will be the Greek scholar in our family. But at this point, I don't know Greek, but I have books from Greek scholars who are. And I can read those books and gain from their knowledge. About this verse that we just read, one man named Kenneth Wiest, who is a Greek scholar with the Moody Bible Institute, said of this verse, there is a play on words that's not apparent in the English language. When it says, they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind. He said there's a play on the words. We could say it this way. Because they did not like to retain God in their minds, God gave them a mind that did not retain God. You see, because they didn't want to think about God, God gave them a mind that didn't have knowledge of God in it. In other words, He gave them what they chose, you see, because they didn't want to think about God and they didn't want to ignore God. God says, all right, if you want it that way, you can have it that way. And that's a very frightening thing, but this is what Paul is saying, that because they didn't want to have any knowledge of God, God said, all right, you can have a mind without knowledge of God. He's painting a very dark picture of humanity apart from God. I think you'd agree with that.